Welcome to the 6 Miles to Supper podcast. I'm your host, Kayla Cox, and I've lost over 80 pounds with intermittent fasting 6 days a week, eating whatever I wanted at my meals, taking a cheat day every Sunday, and walking 6 miles a day. And I'm here to help you on your weight loss journey. In today's episode, we're going to talk about intermittent fasting and your period. And so this is basically an episode for you ladies out there. Hey, but maybe there's some guys out there that want to listen in. You may get some empathy for your wife or girlfriend. So I've been practicing intermittent fasting for a little over 5 years now, and I've been very consistent with it. So I have a lot of data because not only do I track my weight, I also, of course, track my period, and I've been able to then look back and see if anything has really been affected. And I can tell you that for me personally, intermittent fasting just has not affected my period at all. The length of my cycle has stayed pretty regular, pretty consistent. It varies sometimes by a couple of days, but that is no different than when I was obese or even, before I was obese, just at different weights and stuff. It's always been about this way, so nothing has really changed on that front. However, I have found that your period makes intermittent fasting more difficult. The big thing, first of all, is that my appetite really increases around the time of my period, which means that the fasting window is more difficult. It's one thing to just get into a routine and you're like, okay, I don't eat until this certain time, and usually that works out just fine. But for whatever reason, when that appetite increases around the time of the period, it just makes fasting more difficult. And the things that help me, of course, I take cream in my coffee, and I found that by just having that around the time that I would feel hungry helped a lot. Another thing that I found was that occasionally adjusting my window just by a little bit would help. Say if I was at OMAD, I would say that my supper would be a little bit earlier in the day. I would just bump it up by, like if I normally ate at 6, maybe I might eat at like 5 or so. Or if I was, if I had a window that opened, let's say at 4 o'clock, I would bump it up to like 3. I didn't do that very often because I really like to stay consistent with my windows just because it made my life easier. But there were just occasions where it was just a rough period month. And so I would do that. What I did see in those earlier days was that it was an act of kindness towards myself. It's kind of difficult because you have to be honest. You have to ask yourself, am I doing this out of kindness to myself? In other words, I am opening up my window early because I am hungry and I'm going to be miserable, and it feels like self-punishment to sit here and not eat, versus you're just wanting to go off plan. So it's a very individual choice. I think really that's a lot of trial and error, and you can start to see patterns. If that becomes a thing that you're doing all the time and your weight is starting to trend up, then I would say you might want to look at that a little bit more closely. But an occasional act of self-kindness like that, I found to be very helpful. As I went along with intermittent fasting and I just got more used to fasting, it became easier to just sit there with the hunger and be okay with it. Another thing that occasionally I would do and still will do, although it's been quite some time, I think, since I've, quote unquote, needed this, but around, a couple of days before my period, I would be sitting there in the afternoon and my husband would notice, my mood took a dive or whatever. And so he would bring me emergency chocolate, like, just a candy bar or something like that. And I would eat it. And I understand that to some of you out there, it may seem like, well, wait, that's like being inconsistent. And I agree. But what I saw in my own experience was that this was a once a month thing. And usually it wasn't a monthly habit. It was just, once every few months, this might be a thing. And that act was an act of kindness from my husband, and being receptive to that was also an act of kindness to myself. So it's less about being really legalistic with yourself, and it's more about saying, how can I be really kind to myself? And I want to emphasize that if you are obese or overweight, it is an act of kindness to yourself to get the excess weight off, because you feel so much better when your body isn't holding you back physically. Like when you can lay down on your back and just breathe easy, that feels really good. And it is an act of kindness to give yourself that gift. But there's also other things as you're going along to do that may in one aspect seem like, isn't that going a step backwards? But really, I think of it as just being really kind to yourself. And everybody has to find that own line for themselves, but I'm just letting you know what I do, because I never want it to seem like I never varied my plan at all in any cases. I have lots of ways that I varied, based on circumstances in my life. If you find yourself kind of struggling, like, well, wait, am I being too inconsistent, or am I doing the right thing here? I would just offer that you can pay attention to the scale and see over time how this is changing your behavior or not. If you look back and say, wow, that led to, 5 weeks of being off plan, well, okay, that maybe wasn't a good experiment. But if you just say that, oh, this is just an occasional thing that I do because it's my period time, then I would say, then there's no problem there. I understand that some people can feel like, oh no, I'm not doing the right plan, but I would say, it's all about what works for your life. On the weight loss journey, it's almost like your period is this once a month perfect storm that can, if you're not careful, really throw you off track. There are 3 things that are kind of colliding all at the same time, and it can be really difficult to navigate mentally, because what's going on is, first of all, you have the increased appetite, which we've already talked about, but then you also are going to probably, if you're like most women, experience weight fluctuations. And then on top of that, you're going to have all these emotions because your hormones are going all over the place. And yes, sometimes that increased appetite can lead to overeating. And again, that's something you can usually see in hindsight. It's hard to tell when you're actually doing it, because sometimes it can feel like, okay, I'm just eating till I'm full, but then you end up overly full. Or though, sometimes something that can happen is that you are just more bloated than usual. So even if you're not overeating, you may be feeling like you're overeating, which kind of adds to the puzzle even more. And then on top of that, if the scale is trending up because of the water weight fluctuations and everything, then it can feel like that you're failing. But the thing is, you're not. It is normal for your body to increase a little bit of water weight during this time. And if you track your weight, I would encourage you, because I know that there's this temptation to just simply not weigh during your period. And look, if that works for you, like if you really do find that you've been doing that consistently and your weight loss journey is going just fine, then, do what you want to do. But here's what I've seen in my own journey is that because I continued to weigh myself every day, I started to see, oh, yeah, there is this pattern of like, okay, my weight tends to go up during this week, but it comes right back down. And it takes, a couple of days, and just getting used to that pattern and seeing that pattern helped me to be more sane during the rest of the month and during my period time the following month. I can always look back and say, oh yeah, that's right. This always happens every month. It goes up a little bit and then it comes right back down. Although I will say occasionally you'll have this crazy month where it's like your weight actually goes down during your period and you kind of start to question everything. But really, overall, I would say you have to look at your own data and see what's going on. But having that data can really help you to more unemotionally look at things and kind of talk yourself down if you're starting to kind of panic about what's going on. And I've found, certainly for myself, that my emotions tend to run higher during my period and really just before my period. Actually, I would say a couple of days before my period are the most emotional times, and generally during the period they level off. But I tend to feel more anxious and pessimistic during that time than I do otherwise. And just by noticing that, just by saying, oh, okay, this is a normal pattern, it helps me to kind of put everything in perspective. And if I start to feel myself getting anxious or pessimistic, I can just tell myself, it's my period time, and so I'm going to just assume that this is hormonal, and I will think about this at a different point in the month. And usually what I find is that if I just kind of say, okay, we'll deal with that in a couple of weeks, I find that, oh yeah, that thing that I was worried about, not a big deal. And one thing I did that really helped was to start informing my husband about my cycle. So in other words, he really didn't know. And I was really surprised at this. We had been married at this point for probably 12 or 13 years. But I started to put it on his calendar, like, this is my period week. And I would tell him a few days before this is generally when I start to to feel like just more emotional and stuff. So just beware. And that was really helpful for him, actually, to understand that there's, like a whole week where I'm crampy and bloated and all that. And actually a couple of days before that, I'm feeling emotional. And that actually, during my ovulation time, I feel crampy like on one day. And it helped him to have empathy with me. And so I would encourage you to let your husband in on this thing. That way he can be more loving towards you. And I found it very helpful to cut everybody, including yourself, some slack. And so the way that looks for me is, if I feel myself about to snap at one of my kids or to snap at my husband, I'll just wait. I'll catch myself and I'll just remind myself, okay, you're right near your period, or, you're on your period. So let's just wait a second. And just by waiting, usually that temptation to say something passes, and then I continue on with my day. But other times I don't catch myself in time. I'll snap. And then, of course, because you're on your period, you're feeling all emotional and stuff, and you're feeling even worse about, whatever it is that you just said. And I've learned the best cure for that is to apologize quickly. And I've found that it's helpful to be blunt and just to say, I'm sorry, I snapped right now. That's not what I meant. I'm hormonal, which is not an excuse. And then we can all go on with our lives. But if instead I try to hold on to it and not apologize, that just makes my day much, much worse. And so overall, for the emotional aspect of it, I just reminded myself that this too shall pass. I say that phrase a lot in my head. Sometimes on your period, it can feel like, oh no, my appetite is going to be higher from now on. Well, no, it's not. Or I'm going to be emotional from now on. No, you're not. It'll go back to normal. And the last thing, of course, is fatigue. It's just a time where you're more tired, and that can also kind of make you feel worse on this whole weight loss journey, because you start to maybe think that you're lazy or something like that. I mean, I certainly sometimes have that thought of, oh no, I'm becoming sedentary again or something, but that's not really true. It's just during this time, your body just needs more rest. And so I remind myself of that. I try to get in bed earlier. I try to sleep a little later if I can. And if I have the opportunity during the day, I will nap. And if you have the type of job where you can rearrange your workload, I found it helpful to make period time just a little less demanding and decrease the workload a little bit, because I know that during the rest of the month, I can be really productive. Now, I do continue to get my steps in, even though I feel tired, and I have found for myself that I actually feel a lot better because I keep walking. I find that I feel less crampy, and just my overall mood is much, much better. So I would encourage you that if you're kind of debating in your head, should I keep doing, whatever form of exercise that you're doing, I would say yes, but also be kind to yourself. Don't be cracking the whip over your own head. Just if you decide that that's what you want to do, then do it, because ultimately you are the one in control. Every woman's period is different. I understand fully that there are women out there who have really terrible periods. And so if that's you, then ask yourself, okay, what is the nicest way I can treat myself? And then do that, whatever that means. If that means no exercise at all, then give yourself permission to just take the week off of exercise, or whatever you need to do, even if it means taking the week off of intermittent fasting, whatever you need to do to take excellent care of yourself. And ultimately, I would encourage you to just take full responsibility for your plan on your period and hold yourself accountable. So thank you for joining me in this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey guys, I just wanted to give you a quick update on the fundraiser for the 2 pediatric CPAP machines for Elwa Hospital in Liberia. The project is now 90% funded, which means we only have $525 left to go. If you've already donated to the fundraiser, I want to say thank you so much for helping out. But if you haven't donated yet and you would like to, I'm going to leave a link in the show notes that will take you to the DonorSee website so that you can donate. Thank you so much, guys. Together, we can get this project funded. Do you want to lose the weight without getting rid of the foods you love, and that you know you'll go back to eating again anyway? My book, The Laid Back Guide to Intermittent Fasting, teaches you how to practice intermittent fasting so that you lose the weight sustainably and keep it off for good. You can get the audiobook read by me for free when you sign up for your 30-day trial of Audible. The link is in the show notes.